The unexpected translator. Beneath the sprawling night sky of Utah's desert, 12-year-old Elijah Chen sat cross-legged on his roof, his telescope forgotten beside him. He wasn't looking at the stars anymore. They had come down to Earth 3 weeks ago. The Nexarian ships still hovered over major cities worldwide, their hulls shimmering like liquid obsidian in daylight and glowing with internal constellations at night. Elijah adjusted his noise-canceling headphones and focused on his tablet. For the 14th straight hour, he was analyzing the recordings of the Nexarian vocalizations, sounds that had confounded Earth's greatest linguists, mathematicians, and computer systems. The aliens resembled massive felines, standing upright at 7 feet tall with sleek midnight blue fur adorned with luminescent markings. Their embassy had been established in Geneva, where they permitted human delegates to attempt communication. So far, every attempt had failed spectacularly. Elijah. Dinner's been ready for an hour. His mother called from the bedroom window below. When he didn't respond, she sighed and climbed the ladder to the roof. She gently tapped his shoulder, and he jumped. "Sorry, Mom. I'm onto something," he said, removing one earphone. His fingers never stopped tracing patterns on the screen. Dr. Mei Chen looked at her son's work, a complex arrangement of waveforms, mathematical notations, and what appeared to be a primitive translation matrix. As the lead xenobiologist at the Astrobiology Center, she understood the significance of what the world was facing. The Nexarians hadn't shown hostility, but their presence had thrown global markets into chaos and governments into panic. "Honey, even the quantum computers at CERN can't crack their language. It's not just sounds. They use body language, light patterns from those markings, and possibly telepathic elements we can't detect." Elijah shook his head. "Everyone's looking at it wrong. They're not using a language. They're using 17 of them simultaneously." Mai blinked. "What?" "Their vocal sounds are just one component. The ear tufts move in micro-patterns. That's a second language. The tail positions make a third. The bioluminescent markings flash in sequences. That's languages 4 through 10. The whisker vibrations create a mathematical syntax that connects everything." He looked up at his mother, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's like, imagine if humans spoke English with our mouths, signed in ASL with our hands, wrote Chinese with our eyebrows, and tapped out Morse code with our feet, all at once, perfectly synchronized." May stared at her son. Elijah had always been different. Diagnosed with autism at 3, he struggled with social cues and sensory processing, but demonstrated extraordinary pattern recognition abilities. The school system had failed him repeatedly, unable to accommodate his unique learning style. Now, as she looked at his tablet, she wondered if her son's neurodivergent brain might be humanity's greatest asset. "Show me," she said, sitting beside him. For the next hour, Elijah explained his observations. He had isolated patterns no one else had noticed by analyzing the Nexarians' every movement in thousands of video frames. Where others saw randomness, he found structure. Where experts saw noise, he heard music. 3 days later, Dr. Chen stood before the Global Response Committee in Geneva, Elijah fidgeting nervously beside her. "With all due respect, Dr. Chen," said Director Harlow of the International Linguistics Division, "we have the world's foremost experts working on this problem. Your son's hobby project is not what we need right now." From the back of the room, Ambassador Liu of the Asian Coalition spoke up. "Dr. Chen's credentials are impeccable. If she believes her son has discovered something, we should at least examine his work." Director Harlow sighed. "Fine. You have 5 minutes." Elijah approached the podium, his tablet connected to the room's display system. As the recording of a Nexarian began to play, he overlaid his analysis matrices, breaking down the communication into its component parts. The room fell silent as patterns emerged, intricate, beautiful, and undeniably deliberate. "This section here," Elijah pointed, his voice soft but steady, "is a mathematical sequence. And here," His finger traced a pattern of light flashes. This is a positional language describing spatial relationships. They're all synchronized around this central rhythm. Dr. Elijah Lancaster, the renowned physicist, leaned forward. My God, he's right. It's not random. It's structured in multiple dimensions. He turned to Harlow. The boy has found what we missed. Despite the breakthrough, Harlow remained skeptical. Even if this is true, understanding the structure doesn't give us translation. We're no closer to communicating with them. That's where you're wrong, Elijah said, surprising everyone with his sudden confidence. I've been building this. From his backpack, he produced a crude device made from modified commercial electronics, 3D printed components, and what appeared to be parts from several gaming systems. What exactly is that supposed to be? Harlow asked dismissively. A multi-channel synthesizer. It can mimic all 17 components of their communication simultaneously. The room erupted in discussion. Half believed it was a waste of time. The others thought it worth trying. Ambassador Liu silenced them all. The Nexarians have agreed to meet with our delegation again tomorrow. I propose we allow Elijah Chen to demonstrate his device. This is absurd, Harlow protested. We'll be laughingstocks. They already think we're primitive. Sending a child with a homemade toy will only confirm it. And what have your experts accomplished in 3 weeks? Liu countered. Nothing. We have nothing to lose. The next morning, Elijah stood outside the Nexarian embassy, a converted concert hall chosen for its acoustic properties. His mother squeezed his hand reassuringly. Remember, no matter what happens in there, I'm proud of you. Elijah nodded, trying to control his breathing. The noise-canceling headphones hung around his neck, ready to be used if the sensory input became overwhelming. The delegation was small, just Elijah, his mother, Ambassador Liu, Dr. Lancaster, and 2 security personnel. As they entered the main chamber, 3 Nexarians turned toward them. Their massive forms towered over the humans, their fur rippling with waves of bioluminescence. One stepped forward, its amber eyes fixed on Elijah with unmistakable curiosity. The chamber, once filled with the world's best linguistic minds, with their advanced technology, now held only a boy with a homemade device. The contrast was stark, and to some observers watching remotely, laughable. Ambassador Liu bowed slightly. Honored visitors, we present a new approach to communication. The Nexarian's ear tufts twitched in what the humans had come to recognize as acknowledgement. Then it made a sound, part purr, part clicking growl, while its markings pulsed in complex sequences. Previous translation attempts had interpreted such communications as either nonsensical or vaguely threatening. Elijah stepped forward, ignoring protocol. He placed his device on the floor between them and began adjusting settings. The adults tensed, expecting disaster. Instead, the device emitted a series of sounds, lights, and ultrasonic pulses. Simultaneously, Elijah moved his hands in specific gestures, completing the communication attempt. The Nexarians froze. The chamber went silent. Then, slowly, the lead alien's markings began to pulse in a new pattern. It made a sound like water flowing over stones. They're surprised, Elijah whispered. I think they understood. The lead Nexarian approached, its movements deliberate. It crouched down to Elijah's level, an unprecedented gesture, and examined the boy's device. Then it looked directly at him and performed a complex sequence of movements, sounds, and light patterns. Elijah adjusted his device and responded with a similar sequence. Ambassador Liu held her breath. Dr. Lancaster gripped the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. The Nexarian's markings suddenly flared with brilliant blue light. Its ears swiveled forward, and it made a sound no human had heard before, a trilling purr that seemed to contain something impossible. Laughter. What did you say to it? Dr. Chen whispered. Elijah looked up at his mother, his eyes wide with wonder. I told them I see the patterns where others see only stars. And they said. He paused, Checking his device's readings, they said I'm the first human to truly speak. The Nexarian extended one massive paw toward Elijah, palm up, a gesture unmistakable across species. An invitation. Breaking the celestial barrier. News of Elijah's breakthrough spread across the globe within hours. Media outlets alternated between celebrating humanity's child genius and questioning the wisdom of entrusting first contact to a 12-year-old boy. Scientists demanded access to his methods. Governments threatened to take control of the process. Through it all, Elijah remained focused solely on improving his translation device. The Global Response Committee had relocated to a secure facility beneath Geneva, where Elijah now worked alongside a hastily assembled team of specialists. His crude prototype had been refined with advanced components, but its core programming, Elijah's unique algorithms, remained unchanged. The basic structure of Nexarian communication operates on a 17-dimensional matrix, Elijah explained to the assembled experts, his voice soft but steady. He had grown more confident over the past days, finding his footing in this new role. Their concept formation happened simultaneously across multiple channels. Where we think linearly, they think in parallel streams. Director Harlow, who had opposed Elijah's involvement from the start, scoffed from the back of the room. "This is preposterous. You expect us to believe that a child has mastered an alien language when our best systems failed." Dr. Lancaster, who had become one of Elijah's strongest advocates, responded before the boy could. "Director, I verified his findings myself. The math checks out. The patterns are real." "Even if that's true," Harlow countered, "we're talking about entrusting planetary security to a boy who can't even order at a restaurant without having a panic attack." The room fell silent. Elijah flinched but held his ground. "You're right," he said after a moment. "Social situations overwhelm me. Human communication is filled with unspoken rules and indirect meanings that I struggle to process." He took a deep breath. "But the Nexarians don't communicate like humans. They use precise, structured patterns. There's no subtext, no hidden meanings, just pure information transmitted across multiple channels simultaneously." He looked directly at Harlow. "In their language, my brain isn't broken. It's optimal." Ambassador Liu, who had been monitoring the discussion, stood up. "The Nexarians have requested another meeting, specifically with Elijah." "What do they want?" someone asked. Liu looked uncomfortable. "They wouldn't say. At least, not in a way our systems could interpret." They communicated directly with Elijah's device. All eyes turned to the boy. "They want to discuss something called the celestial barrier," Elijah said. "I think it's important." 3 hours later, Elijah entered the Nexarian embassy again. This time, his mother and Dr. Lancaster accompanied him, along with a security detail that had been reduced at the alien's insistence. The lead Nexarian, whom Elijah had begun calling Artem based on the patterns of its markings, awaited them. The massive feline being's fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns as Elijah approached. Using his refined device, the boy transmitted a greeting. Arkham responded with a complex sequence that made Elijah's eyes widen. "What did it say?" Dr. Chen whispered. "They didn't come here to establish diplomatic relations," Elijah translated, his voice tense. "They came to warn us." Artem continued, its communication growing more complex. Elijah's device struggled to keep up, but the boy's understanding seemed to exceed its capabilities. He began responding directly, using gestures and vocal sounds alongside his device. "There's a barrier," Elijah explained to the humans as the exchange continued. "A kind of threshold that separates developing species from the wider galactic community. They call it the celestial barrier." Dr. Lancaster leaned forward, like the great filter in astrobiology theory. Elijah nodded. "Similar. They say most species never cross it. They either destroy themselves or stagnate." Artem's markings pulsed rapidly, and Elijah translated. "The barrier isn't technological. It's communicative. Species that can't transcend their limited perception of communication can never truly join the galactic community. Is that why they came? Dr. Chen asked. To test if we could cross this barrier. Elijah shook his head after receiving Artem's response. No, they came because something's approaching Earth, something that crossed the barrier long ago and has been hunting developing species ever since. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Artem continued, its movements becoming more urgent. Elijah's translations came faster. They're called the Void Speakers. They communicate through channels that induce fear and confusion. Their language is a weapon that fragments social cohesion and promotes conflict. Like psychological warfare, Lancaster suggested. More direct than that. Elijah replied. Their communication literally rewires neural pathways over time, turning a species against itself. Artem's markings flashed in a pattern Elijah hadn't seen before. The boy's hands moved in response, creating gestures that seemed almost instinctual. The Nexarians came to help us prepare, he continued. They detected the Void Speakers' approach months ago and arrived ahead of them. But they couldn't warn us directly because we weren't ready to understand. Until you, Dr. Chen said softly. Elijah nodded. The Nexarians believe humanity has potential because we're diverse in our thinking. They specifically mention neurodivergence as an evolutionary advantage against the Void Speaker's influence. Director Harlow, who had been monitoring remotely, broke into the conversation through Dr. Lancaster's communicator. This is obviously a ploy. They're trying to manipulate us with fear tactics. Artem's ears flattened against its head. It had understood Harlow's words without translation. The alien made a series of quick movements that Elijah translated with growing alarm. The Void Speakers will arrive within 3 rotations. That's about 72 Earth hours. What do they suggest we do? Ambassador Liu asked, her voice steady despite the shocking news. Elijah conferred with Artem, their exchange becoming increasingly complex. The humans watched in amazement as the boy seemed to grow more fluent by the minute, his gestures matching the aliens with surprising precision. They want to help us build a communication shield, Elijah finally said, a way to filter and neutralize the Void Speaker's influence. But they need something from us. What? Several voices asked simultaneously. People like me, Elijah said quietly. They need humans whose brains process patterns differently. People who are neurodivergent. Back at the secure facility, the Global Response Committee erupted in debate. Some saw the Nexarians' request as suspicious. Others viewed it as their only hope. Throughout the heated discussion, Elijah sat silently, watching the patterns of human communication unfold, as complex in their way as the Nexarians, but far less harmonious. Even if we believe them, Harlow argued, we can't just hand over neurodivergent individuals to an alien species based on a vague threat. No one's suggesting that, Dr. Chen countered, but we need to consider the possibility that they're telling the truth. Ambassador Liu, who had been consulting with world leaders, addressed the room. We've detected unusual transmissions at the edge of our solar system. Something is coming. Elijah stood up. I've been thinking about this wrong, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. We don't need the Nexarians to protect us. We need to learn from them. He connected his device to the main display and began showing complex patterns. The Void Speaker's communication works because it exploits neural pathways. But if we can teach people to recognize and filter these patterns consciously, we can immunize ourselves against their influence. Dr. Lancaster studied the display. You're talking about teaching the human brain to recognize harmful communication patterns and reject them. Like a neural firewall. Exactly, Elijah said. And the people best suited to develop this skill are those already accustomed to filtering sensory input differently, people whose brains are wired to see patterns where others don't. Over the next 48 hours, Elijah worked alongside Artem and a hastily assembled team of neurodivergent individuals, mathematicians with ADHD, engineers with autism, artists with synesthesia, each bringing unique perspectives to the challenge. Together, They developed what Elijah called a neural translation protocol, a method for recognizing and neutralizing the void speaker's communication patterns. When the void speaker's ship entered Earth orbit, it broadcast its first message, a signal that induced immediate anxiety and confusion in those who heard it. But thanks to the protocol, Earth was ready. The message was intercepted, decoded, and neutralized. 3 days later, Elijah faced the void speaker's emissary, a ghostly, shifting form that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Using his understanding of Nexarian communication principles, he established contact on terms humanity could control. The void speakers had not expected resistance. They certainly hadn't expected to be understood. When Elijah demonstrated humanity's ability to decode and filter their signals, they retreated, promising to return when Earth was properly prepared for their message. As the threat receded, the Nexarians prepared to depart as well. In a final meeting, Artem addressed the Global Response Committee through Elijah's translation. Your species stands at the threshold of the celestial barrier. Today, you have taken the first step across it. The universe is filled with voices, some that seek to help, others to harm. Your greatest strength lies not in technology, but in the diversity of your minds. In the galactic community, those once considered different will be your greatest ambassadors. The Nexarian touched its forehead to Elijah's in a gesture of respect. We will return when you are ready for the next lesson. As the Nexarian ships rose into the night sky, Elijah watched from his familiar spot on the roof. His mother joined him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. What happens now? She asked. Elijah smiled, his eyes fixed on the stars. Now we learn to listen differently, and when we're ready, we'll join the conversation. In the years that followed, Earth established the Celestial Communication Initiative, with Elijah Chen as its youngest director. The Neural Translation Protocol became standard education worldwide, taught alongside mathematics and science. Neurodivergent individuals, once marginalized, became valued for their unique perspectives and abilities. And somewhere among the stars, watching and waiting, both allies and adversaries took note. Humanity had found its voice in the cosmic dialogue, and it spoke with the harmonious diversity of a species that had discovered its greatest strength in what it once perceived as weakness.